So many of you saw the top 5 wide boots video and asked for a similar one for narrow boots, and that's exactly what we're doing today. Now the list here is based on how narrow the boots feel, combined with, of course, how good of a football boot it actually is. So if you have a slim foot and want that tight snug sensation, these 5 boots are the ones to go for. Number 5 is the Umbro UX Accuro, which does at first look like a decently wide football boot, but because the midfoot is relatively narrow and the boot is also pretty low profile, it means that there is actually less space inside of it than you'd imagine. And even with my slim foot, the boot is still pretty tight. Combine that with the fact that the Accuro is actually a pretty good football boot, and this is a deserved number 5. In 4th place, we have one of the best releases of the year, the Adidas Nemesis 17 Plus 360 Agility, which also happens to be one of the tightest fitting boots you can get your hands on straight out of the box. And although it won't be as tight once you break it in and the material softens up a bit, you will still get a very tight locked-in sensation if you have a slim foot. And that is all, by the way, thanks to the compression you get from the elasticated torsion tape. And that, to me, is worthy of 4th place. 3rd place and the bronze goes to the Nike Mercurial Superfly 5. Now, the Mercurial has always been a notoriously narrow boot, and the Superfly 5 is no exception, because it has an incredibly slim last, a super tight fitting upper, and then of course it has, the anatomical sole plate, which means that if you have a wide foot, there will probably be a little bit of rollover because the foot is simply going to fall out over the edges of the sole plate itself. On the other hand, if you do have a narrow foot, a slim foot, it's going to give you a really tight, secure sensation where you just feel locked in and ready to let loose. Pun intended. Number 2 is little brother, the Nike Mercurial Vapor 11. And while it technically has the same last and thus should be as narrow fitting as the Superfly 5, to me, it feels just a little bit more tight. And that, I think, is down to the fact that the Taycan synthetic upper doesn't diff and stretch as much as the Flyknit would on the Superfly 5. And combining this here narrow fit with the fact that the Vapor is one of the best boots on the market, if you have a slim foot, you should seriously consider this. Now, before we move on to number 1, I gotta give a shout out to 2 of the boots that didn't quite make the list. And while the ACE17 PURECONTROL and the Umbro Velocita 3s aren't necessarily the most super narrow, uber body tight fitting boots, you will get a relatively pleasant snug sensation, and also the fact that they aren't too roomy, so you won't feel that your feet are just swimming around inside of the boots. Decent options, but they aren't as good as number 1. The king of narrow football boots to me is the Mizuno Morelia Neo II. And while it does have a full foot made out of kangaroo leather, which means that it will stretch a little bit, this is still the most narrow, tight-fitting boot I've come across in a while, and that's saying something given that I have a relatively slim foot. But it does feel so tight because the boot itself is not very wide. And then of course it's not a very tall boot either, bringing the upper incredibly close around your foot all over. And combining this with the fact that, as I've said many times before, this is a top quality football boot, great comfort, very well performing, this should be an absolute no-brainer and a dream if you have a slim foot. If you have a wide foot, you might as well forget about it. So that was my list of the 5 best boots you can get if you have a narrow foot. Now of course you have a bit more luxury as a narrow-footed guy than people with wide feet, because naturally you can wear a medium width or even a wide football boot if you so please. But if you want that snug tight fit, the 5 boots on the list are the ones to go for. But how does your top 5 list look? You should let me know in the comment section right down below. Don't forget to subscribe and slap a like on the video if you have a good time. And lastly, check out our latest top 5s right down there. And with that said, I'm signing off. Cheerio.